I know it's something we're going to touch on, which I think ties in on the changes that we've both kind of gone through in the past month. Was how much we appreciate our art. How I came to a newfound realization that, man, I didn't realize what I was missing all this time.
Welcome to Out of the Box Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Steele Adcock. My name is Jose Tapia. This is a show where we talk about out-of-the-box ideas in the world and just different things that catch our attention. Hopefully, you can also find this interesting. And so we'll start off with some introductions. Steele, if you want to kick it off.
All right. So my name is Steele Adcock. I am currently pursuing a degree at the University of Houston in Victoria in counseling psychology, a master's program. I only got one more semester left, and then I get my licensed professional counseling license. Before that, I got my bachelor's degree at St. Mary's University in San Antonio in communication studies with a minor in psychology. And I did a little bit of research there, but I'm doing much more research at UHV right now, working on about 3 research projects right now. I also do filmmaking on the side. I've been doing that for over 13 years now. Got into a film festival one time. And other than that, I like to write. My job right now is a content writer, a remote content writer for different law firms and stuff. But yeah, that's the gist of it.
Awesome. And like I said at the beginning, my name is Jose Tapia. And a little bit about myself. I am a graduate also from St. Mary's University. It's actually where I met Steele. I'm a communication major, speech communication major. I studied music as well, so I have that music background. And one of the things that I'm currently doing, I was working at the university as an admission counselor, and it's been about a month that I've been pursuing my side hustle as a full-time thing, which is balloon making. So my dad, when I was younger, he was a clown for birthday parties, and now I've continued what I learned from him, specifically in the balloon art business, and just continue to do that at parties, at restaurants, different stuff like that. So that's one of the artistic endeavors that I'm doing. I'm also a musician for church, and so I do get to play music at church with the piano, leading with the guitar, and also with vocals. So just a little bit of different things there. But yeah, we're excited today to share a little bit about what the struggles are for creatives and how you can make that into a full-time thing. Maybe some ideas and that might benefit you in your journey as a creative. So, Steele, did you want to start off with a question?
Yeah. So the first question that we came up with for this podcast is it's all about what you're talking about. The whole theme is about motivation to pursue artistic goals. So, like for me, it's filmmaking. For Jose, it's music and balloon making as a small business. So the first question really, and the whole point of this podcast today is to try to tap into what it takes to pursue your artistic goals. Because, a lot of the classic struggling artists, everyone who's pursuing an art form is struggling in some way, and some are luckier than others. But I think a lot of artists can kind of relate to the beginning being challenging, self-doubt, and trying to figure out how you're going to make a living off of something that's so different than the usual kind of work. So the first question going to that would be, what are some new life changes that you've gone through recently that relate to pursuing your artistic goals?
Yeah, well, one of the most recent ones, like I said in my introduction, it's been roughly about a month since, I started doing my balloon making full time, which has now replaced, in terms of finances, what I was making at my other job. And so I think it's to make that jump. Sometimes it takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of risks sometimes, because you don't have a consistent, salary, or, you're not getting paid by the hour. really what you make from getting out there. And so you really have to position yourself in a venue where, you know, you're doing that on the side, but then it starts replacing slowly what you're doing during the week, right? So for example, the balloon making things, that's mainly like a weekend kind of deal. And so it allowed me to work during the week. And then on the weekends, I was also working with the balloons, creating consistency, advertising. And I realized that at one point, I could replace what I was making on the weekend or what I was making during the week on the weekend. And sometimes, you know, I see a lot of artists, you know, they sometimes don't find that soon or fast enough, you know, and so they can't make the transition. And for me, you know, it's something that I really enjoy balloon making. I did not at first though. So that's a good point to mention. Sometimes you don't know what might catch your attention or what might help you pay the bills and still kind of be something that you enjoy while you transition into other projects. Right now, I'm not making anything, or actually, I am making some income through the music gigs that I'm getting, playing at church. But it's not something that could replace, you know, a full-time income, or at least, you know, to pay all living expenses. But at the end of the day, you know, it doesn't have to be much, and you sometimes have to humble yourself. Like I'm living right now with my parents, and you know, it's okay. I mean, for me, that's not something that affects me, you know, in terms of relationships with, for example, my girlfriend, or you know, with other people. You know, some people might find that, you know, oh wow, like he's still living with his parents. Like why hasn't he moved out? But you know, I'm having the option, and my parents, in a way, are supporting me with, you know, helping me push the endeavors that I have in mind. I'm also helping out at the house, but it really comes down to being humble about what you're doing. You know, humbling yourself and not allowing other people's opinion about what you're doing to affect you, right? Because you know, if we want to have the nice car and all that, you know, at the same time we're doing all these transitions, you know, it's kind of hard to do that. And so one really has to humble themselves. And if you do have the opportunity, or maybe you don't have the opportunity to live at home, but you find 3, 4, 5 other people that are willing to, you know, live together, really humble means, and just everyone's working on their projects, well, you know, that could be another way, right? But at the end of the day, it's really being humble about what you're doing so that you can have more time to work on your craft, right? Or
Yeah,
what do
yeah.
you think, Stu?
Yeah, I think that's very well said. Yeah, because I can relate to that. I mean, I'm living with my parents. It wasn't even like a pre-planned thing. Like I wasn't planning on moving out as soon as I graduated St. Mary's, because I knew, I don't know, I knew I still had more schooling to do with my master's degree, and I should be moving in out about 2 years. But I guess what my parents always brought me up is ingrained in me is like always having a backup plan, like a solid foundation that you can base. Like they never discouraged me from pursuing filmmaking, even though filmmaking, the chances of making it big is slim, because it's a huge field and there's a lot of competition, and it's only natural. But I think just the idea of having a solid foundation, which is why it's not the only reason, but it's definitely one of the reasons why I went for my master's degree to get a license in counseling. You know, one is because I'm passionate about counseling and I like helping people, and I've done it in the past. The other reason is because it's a solid foundation, like it's a guaranteed job, you know, and it's a pretty solid
Mm-hmm.
job too, with enough income to cover and help support my filmmaking. So I can still do filmmaking on the side. I may not have as much time if I didn't have the counseling job, but at the same time, I'll still at least have more time than if I were to go to medical school and become a doctor, which is another thing I was going to do at one point. But then that's when I decided to weigh the options and then decide that filmmaking is really not something I can give up, you know? So counseling gives me.
And like something that you have also found has been, you know, a transition, because when we've talked about your interest, you have found a way to add the psychology into your films, right? So it's still feeding into that main goal or main idea that you have envisioned for your creative projects, while at the same time you're getting your certification and you still have that backup just in case, right? Which is something that, sometimes we're not earning money off of the things that we create at first, but at least we have something on the side to still help us with, at least finding a way to live, right? To survive.
Right, exactly. And I know it's something we're going to touch on, which I think ties in on any of the changes that we've both kind of gone through in the past month, was how much we appreciate our art, how I came to a newfound realization that, man, I didn't realize what I was missing all this time. Like, I know as you were kind of busier with your job at St. Mary's and it was taking time away from music and stuff. And for me, it was grad school, just preparing for the comps exam, doing research, taking classes. And then this past few weeks, I finally actually had time to sit down and start writing scripts again, making short films, editing, all things that I love. I love video editing. It's like an addiction. But yeah, just like, when I'm in school and I'm in the midst of doing all the schoolwork and my job stuff, I don't have time to think about filmmaking or anything like that. And I'm just kind of like in the zone, I guess, not really, kind of like tunnel vision. But now that I've come back to filmmaking a little bit, it's kind of like a spark. It's like something I feel alive again, like we were talking about before. It kind of sparks something in you, like, oh man, I forgot how much this makes me feel alive, how much this makes me feel something, how exciting it feels, because you got to kind of go through life and you're like not feeling excited, and then you realize what's missing when you go back to it, like me and filmmaking and you and music and balloons and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the statistic goes that almost only 13% of the world in adults say that they feel fulfilled with what they're doing in life, and so I think that was one of the main reasons also why I had decided to move, even though I knew it was a risk, and even though I knew, it might take a little bit more from my end to, go ahead and continue with this project with the balloons, which is the main income stream right now. I just didn't feel like my creative juices were flowing. It just felt like, I was doing enough. I was still working on the weekends, but I wasn't creating any new figures, and sometimes you have to work those, full weeks, right? If you really want to see and be able to transition, you have to really work. I've been doing balloon making since I was 12. It's been 12 years now. I'm 24, and it's crazy because the reason why I was able to make that change was because I've gone through those 12 years, right? It's taken some time, but it was worth it. It was worth sticking through it. I've developed relationships and places where I can replace that income from the week. And so, which is awesome, but it takes sometimes working all week to really get yourself up there. And sometimes it's really believing in yourself at the end of the day, because it's taking a risk and saying, I believe that I can do it, and I don't want to wake up one day and say, I should have tried, right? What if I did this, and that's one of the things, regrets is, I think, one of the worst nightmares that one can have in their older years. And so that's one of the things that, I want to promote. I want other people to know that it is possible. You don't just have to watch it on TV or on social media and dream of the possibility. You can take action and start working on your side hustle today. It might be sacrificing, a weekend or the weekends to get that up and running so that later you can, transition, or maybe working in the evenings after a long day of work and, deciding to put in the hours to get your projects out there. But, it's worth it. I think it's definitely worth it. Once you cross that hurdle of being able to create and do this for a living, it's just really awesome. You feel so alive because every day you're creating something new. People enjoy watching you and seeing what you create. And even though, I'm not making millions, that's not what matters. What matters is that I'm creating, almost like a superhero. I'm becoming the person that I want to become because I'm putting the hours where I want to. The energy is going in a specific direction. And, it's not to say that some people might find it fulfilling to be doing two things at a time. Maybe they have their day job or a part-time job and still do their creative projects. If both of them, are fulfilling for you, then go ahead, but if you want to make the transition and one's not happy at the moment, then, it's starting to put those hours to really work at it so that later on in 2-3 years, you can make that transition. And so I would rather go, through the pain for at least, 1, 2, 3 years than, never have tried at all. Right. So yeah, that's something that I had in mind right now.
Yeah, that reminds me of a story I heard about recently where a 40-year-old man, I don't know what he was doing before, but he decided that he wanted to be a doctor, and he was 40 years old already. But he went to medical school. I think it took him 8 years, and he ended up becoming a doctor by the time he was like, I guess, 48. So it's like, yeah, if you really have the passion, and of course you do kind of have to have resources depending on what you're trying to do. But yeah, when you have those two things, I think you can make it happen if you just go for it. Of course, it's
never too late. Yeah, it's never too late. It's statistics show that we're probably, if let's say we are probably in our 20s, we're probably going to live 2 or 3 more lives. We have already lived 1/4 or 1/3 of our life. And so we still have a long way to go, and that's one of the things that we have to develop a good relationship with time sometimes to realize, because, society tells us like, oh, get it faster, save up a year of schooling and, make this shorter so that you can start working now. And, sometimes we just have to remember there's patience as well. And valuing patience is what really sets you on that track of living day by day. Because, like right now I was saying, what if it takes 1, 2, or 3 years to transition into the life that you want to live? Well, you can't do that without patience, right? Because one can say like, oh, well, why can't I just do it within the next month or the next 3 months, And it really takes that patience to really say like, okay, well, how am I going to start doing that project today? How am I going to be patient today so that I can start building those steps, those layers to get to where I want to be, right? It's kind of like that story where they say it's there's this person that goes to somebody that was building, and he was putting some bricks, right? And he asked him like, hey, so what are you doing? And he said, yeah, I'm just layering bricks here. There was another person right next to him, and he asked him like, hey, what are you doing? He's like, well, I'm building a wall, right? And then he asked the third person, he had a big smile, and he said, what are you building? And he said, I'm building a cathedral, right? And so you start seeing the difference. The first person, just saw, oh, I'm just putting a brick, right? The second person, just the wall. But the other person, the last person, saw that big mission, saw that big idea, I'm going to do this. And he had that big smile because he knew he had a mission. He had a path of something that he was going to create. It was going to be a cathedral, right? And he already saw it in his mind, which is something that I think is fascinating about the creative process. Because let's say, for example, whenever I'm going to create a new figure with balloons, sometimes I can see it in my mind before it actually comes into fruition, like until it becomes a lot, when it becomes alive. And so I think it's being patient with that process of saying like, okay, so maybe I can improve it here, maybe I can do this, but it starts forming itself first in the mind, and then it becomes a reality in the world.
Yeah, exactly. You
Which
gotta
is,
have a vision.
something I think it's awesome.
Yeah, if you don't have a vision, it's a difference between someone having a vision and just seeing things, I guess, for what they are. You got to be able to see beyond the things in front of you. I think that's part of a lot of artists. Like paintings, filmmaking. You don't just see ordinary objects; you see something more. That's what the whole surrealist art movement was about. Is about seeing ordinary things in strange ways. I read somewhere once that art is simply taking the ordinary and making it extraordinary by either exaggeration or different things like that, changing it slightly. So
Yeah.
we got about 10 more minutes left. um
Yeah. And I think going off of that, I think there's a really cool quote that I have here in my desk, and it says, every child is an artist. The problem is staying an artist when you grow up. Pablo Picasso.
oh really?
So it's true. I think that creative process is sucked out sometimes out of us,
It can be, yeah.
and we come to think that we aren't artists. But I think, when we talk about artists, we're not just talking about, people who paint or people who do sculpting or whatever it might be. We're talking about business people. Business people are artists because they have to create new ways to start their entrepreneurial projects. Scientists, they're also artists. Every field has its art form. It has its way of creating new things. Because it's constantly evolving, and so every child has this artistic endeavor within themselves, expressed in different areas. But that's one of the things that I've always felt like, if something's sucking out your creative juices, find a way to get out of it or move somewhere else, because at the end of the day, it's almost like a muscle. If you don't use it, you lose it, right? And so, yeah, I think that's something that we have to continue practicing to also feel alive. For those who do find more of the art kind of projects, sometimes that makes you feel alive in any creative endeavor, whether that be business, science, engineering, it just makes you feel alive. And that's how you know where you want to go, right? Because I think another struggle that a lot of artists find is that they enjoy doing so many things, right? They're really good at, or they are half good at painting, and then they're half good at drawing, and then they're half good at, sculpting or doing, whatever it might be, balloon making in my case. And then they don't know which one to pursue. And sometimes the best way is to double down on one specific thing. But if you don't know what to do, maybe you haven't tasted enough, right? And so you might still have that time to go and taste some things. But if you do know, maybe there's one that comes out better than the other, then you might be able to start doubling down on that one. And so it's really having that time. I think time is a big asset for creatives, because when you have time and the patience, it gives you the opportunity to experiment, right? Experiment to create new things. Otherwise, you're just kind of living as you go. You're just, doing the superficial, but not making something extraordinary.
Right. And time, for me, time and motivation are the two challenges that I probably face the most. Time, obviously, because I spoke earlier about grad school, and balancing that out, but also motivation, because the motivation isn't always there. It's not there every single day. Or sometimes, in my case, it was there for like 4 days straight, where I just had this motivation and this energy to do filmmaking. So I had a ton of videos and started working more on my script. But then the next day, you're like, wake up, you're like tired, and that same motivation is not there. Or like I've worked on film projects my whole life, pretty much. But like full length ones, those are the hardest ones to do because they take about a year and a half to make when you're not like, because you're not like a professional. You don't have like a schedule. It's kind of just you're doing it week by week, and you got to work
Mm-hmm.
around different schedules and stuff. But even when I worked on like film projects that I was really passionate about in the beginning, somewhere around the middle or near the end, I start losing the same passion I had in the beginning. And at that point, I'm just like, I need to finish what I started. We already worked so hard to get this far. We had to finish it. But then it's always worth it in the end because then I finally finish the movie and then I watch it, with friends and stuff. And like, man, this really, either it turned out better than I expected or this part didn't turn out as good. But either way, it's like I feel like I accomplished something. And I guess that kind of like teaches me that even when you feel doubt or you don't have the motivation to continue, it's like just go for it anyways because it's going to be worth it in the end. I don't know if you struggle with motivation ever before on any of your projects.
Yeah, all the time, man. I think, I right now where I'm focusing more on the balloon stuff, I've had a little bit less time to kind of be more creative with the music. And I think it's sometimes okay, you'll have those moments where you move from one interest to the other, and it's just our curiosity, we follow the bliss of the moment. And at the end of the day, if it's making you happy to go from one to the other, or maybe putting 80% of your time on one and 20% on the other, if it's making you happy, I think that's one of the big aspects to really knowing what to do, because it's really hard sometimes to tell, like, hey, like, am I doing the right thing? Should I be putting more time on the music or should I be putting more time on the balloons? That's an internal dialogue that, I have sometimes. But I think at the end of the day, I realized that, what is making me happy. And sometimes I just enjoy learning about how to market the balloon stuff and what I can do to get awareness and that sort of thing. And so that's exciting. And so I follow that bliss of the moment. For example, today I was going to start editing a video for a tutorial that I'm going to put out for balloon making, which is on my YouTube channel, Balloon Bros. And then all of a sudden I had this bliss of, recording a music video, or recording myself singing a song that I really enjoy. And that led me into a path of like then doing a duet on TikTok with somebody else. And then, it just fills you with so much joy. And sometimes it can become a rabbit hole. So you have to learn, how to back up, and say like, okay, well, what's a priority right now? And then be like, okay, so I really need to get awareness and start working on a commercial. So I'm going to make that commercial and edit that video.
Yeah, so you almost had to force yourself to do something when you're in that rabbit hole, because sometimes I'll get in a rabbit hole too, a rabbit hole of like editing or like over the past 4 days. And then I'm like, yeah, but I haven't been working on the horror script. And it's in the back of my mind. I'm supposed to be working on my next film project that's a horror movie. And so I literally, even though I had no motivation to do it, I just felt like, maybe I should just watch a horror movie and see if it inspires me. But no, I was like, no, you keep telling yourself that you're going to sit down at this computer. And that's what I did yesterday in the evening. And I put some like music helps me like write and like edit sometimes to like motivate me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, emotional song or like for the horror script, I listened to like an hour-long YouTube video mix of like ambient horror drones to get me in the mood. And then when I first started, I was like, oh, no, I'm not feeling it at all. But then once I kind of just forced myself to get into it, before I knew it, I was spending like over an hour writing and adding to it and fixing this and that. And then before you know it, I'm back into it again. So it's like, sometimes you have to almost force yourself to get that motivation.
Like find those triggers, right? That get you back into the flow state, where you're just constantly creating.
Yeah, it's so easy to resist doing something that you want to do or know you should do. And it's so easy to go for the instant gratification instead, like, oh, I'll give myself 10 extra minutes of a break, or I'll watch a movie or something, because I don't feel like it right now. But it's like, you got to like, get yourself out of that kind of mindset almost and force it sometimes.
Yeah. And I think that motivation aspect is a is a key component, because sometimes, we are human, we're not machines. And so we're not just going to be constantly like, oh, creating. Sometimes you have to have those moments of, silence, or those moments of, discovering something else, which helps you come back. And once you reconvene, you have more ideas. That happens to me too. I thought I was a procrastinator, but I discovered that my procrastination is actually really helpful, in the sense that sometimes the period between starting, I'll work on something real quick, and then I'll let it go because, maybe just a roadblock that, I stopped creating, and then I'll come back to it after 2 to 3 days, and then I'll work on it a little bit, and I have fresh ideas that, I wrote down, or something that new that came up, and made me think of the project I was working on, and it comes out better, right? Instead of trying to do it all at once. But sometimes it does come at once,
It depends, yeah.
But it's not procrastinating in a way. It's just, really catching those flow states, right? Those moments where you're like, okay, wow, this is really a great idea, or something that I find fascinating, and so that's a good point to mention, that sometimes, there might be those states that you feel like you're procrastinating on a project, but it's actually taking a rest to really feel inspired, right? To get another perspective, or a way to get inspired, so that you can continue that project. And so, yeah.
So
Sometimes I think my best work comes at random moments in the day. Sometimes it's something I heard someone say, or something that, somebody asked me at the restaurant, or where I sometimes make balloon figures. So just different things like that can be sources of inspiration. And I think it's healthy as way, healthy also, because, it's another way to just kind of let it kind of simmer, it's kind of like letting the meat simmer in the grill, just waiting for it to really get to that perfect state, so that, ideas can start coming in.
Yeah. So
does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. It's kind of like, and at the conclusion of our podcast, I'll say this, is like, it's kind of like you have to give yourself a break so you don't burn out. You know what I mean? So you burn out,
Yeah.
nothing's gonna happen. But
Yeah.
final words, in terms of like final words, I will say this. There is something that you said that reminded me of what I read in this biography about Leonardo da Vinci. He kind of did a similar thing, to where he would work on a painting, but he wouldn't finish it all at once, of course. But he would like go days at a time without working on it at all. And then like he would take like a minute or 10 minutes or 15 minutes out of a day to add just the tiniest little detail or the tiniest little modification to make it like perfect. And so like he wouldn't even like work on it every single day or 24 hours a day. He would just, he would add this here and there every so often until it was done. But with that being said, do you have any final words or for this podcast?
Yeah, I think, I would just like to say, if there's something creative that you want to do full time, put in the time. It's going to be sacrificing something, in your day, in your life that's going on. But the rewards of it becoming a reality are far more exciting than never having tried at all. And so put in the time, be patient with whatever project you're doing, and don't expect to become a millionaire. Like, don't have that pressure to make a lot of money, especially in the creative aspect. As long as you're able to make the means and have the time, and also have the happiness to really wake up every day and feel excited about life, I think at the end of the day, that's what every creative should aspire to be, the having that legacy and also having the opportunity to grow in your artistic endeavors.
Very well said. All right. Well, that concludes our
Sounds
podcast
good.
for today. Next week, we are going to talk religion. So it should be very interesting.
Awesome.
All
Take
right.
care, guys.